Are you grossed out by worms? I am. I get goosebumps at that weird pulsing wiggle they do to move around. But I can't bring myself to squish them either because they're just little worms. But have you ever been scared of a worm? What if they were 6 feet long, covered in rainbow armor, and had jaws that could snap a fish clean in half faster than a samurai? Let's face this unexpected monster together while I give you today's dose of bean scent knowledge. There are two kinds of horror. The kind that charges at you screaming, and the kind that waits patiently beneath your feet, silent and absolutely sure that they're gonna catch you unexpected. Meet the bobbit worm. It falls firmly into category 2. Not only is it real, it's been ambushing prey from the ocean floor since the age of the dinosaurs. It's not large in the way bears or crocodiles are, but they grow to a minimum of 3 feet. That's a damn big worm. Imagine you're standing on a sunlit reef. The water is clear, the sand is soft, and somewhere just beneath that picturesque seafloor, this worm that's longer than your couch is lying in wait, motionless but alert. Only a small fraction of its head pokes above the sand, its 5 antennae gently waving like periscopes, scanning for the vibrations of a snack. That snack might be a crab, a small fish, or a juvenile cephalopod. If it's unlucky, it might catch a glimpse of this terrifying predator. Eunice aphroditois, yeah, real different from its nickname, but we'll get to that later, is an ambush predator that lives mostly in shallow tropical waters throughout the Indo-Pacific. That's everything from the east coast of Africa to the Philippines and northern Australia. It prefers warm, nutrient-rich zones, and it makes its home by burrowing vertically into the seafloor, anchoring itself with rigid bristles lining its body. This burrow can be as deep as 3 meters. That's taller than a giraffe. Yes, it lives in a sand tube roughly the size of a mammal from your local zoo. At first glance, the bobbit worm looks like a centipede took a gasoline bath. Its body is segmented and armored with a rainbow sheen that gleams like oil on water, scientifically referred to as structural coloration. This is the same effect you see in peacock feathers or butterfly wings, caused not by pigments, but by microscopic surface structures that are bending light. The worm's outer layer is covered in chitinous plates called sclerites, which give it the bendable yet protective texture of medieval chainmail. Their body shape is so distinct and alien that for a long time, bobbit worms were misidentified or lumped in with other polychaetes, marine bristleworms, despite being far more predatory and aggressive than their squishy cousins. They belong to the order Eunicida and are one of the largest ambush predators among segmented worms. Most people think of worms as soft, passive decomposers, but apparently the bobbit worm was made with inherent roid rage. Let's zoom in on the face, if you can call it that. The bobbit worm's mouth is equipped with a pharynx that can rapidly evert or turn inside out, just like xenomorphs from the Alien movies. At the end of this protruding pharynx are 2 sharp mandibles, modified jaws that clamp shut like a guillotine, and that's being mild about it. Their bite has been clocked at speeds so fast they can snap a fish clean in half before it realizes it's being hunted. Those are speeds that a Japanese samurai gets jealous over. This attack is powered by hydraulic pressure. The worm rapidly contracts muscles along its body, pushing internal fluid into the pharynx, causing it to launch upward. Think of it like a Coke bottle flying into the air after a mint's been dropped into it. If you've never seen that experiment before, look it up and tell us in the comments below what you think it would feel like to get rammed by a flying Coke bottle. You'd think a predator like this would get more attention, right? But until recently, the bobbit worm stayed pretty obscure, relegated to the odd aquarium horror story or grainy footage from marine researchers. They aren't easily bred in captivity, and since they only leave their burrow to spawn, they're hard to catch in the act. Most of what we know comes from long-term observations and by accident, like aquariums discovering a 5-foot worm living unnoticed in their coral tank for years, slowly picking off fish one by one. In one famous case at Newquay's Blue Reef Aquarium in the UK, staff began noticing fish disappearing overnight. After months of confusion, they dismantled part of the exhibit and found a 1.2 meter bobbit worm nestled deep within the artificial reef. It had been hiding there for years, eating, growing, and eluding capture like a marine version of the Phantom of the Opera. The staff nicknamed it Barry. So now that you know of a giant worm that lives in the sand and bites like a bear trap, let's talk about how it hunts. Because for the bobbit worm, stealth isn't just a tactic, it's the business model. Picture a tropical reef bustling with life. A school of fish glides by overhead, reef crabs skitter along the bottom, maybe a shrimp or two jets past on a tiny mission of their own. Below the sand is the bobbit worm. Their 5 antennae are the key players here. These are sensory organs that detect the most minuscule vibrations in the surrounding water, like the tremble of fin beats or the scritch of a crab's claws. They don't just sense movements, they map patterns. Over millions of years, bobbit worms have become experts in reading the rhythm of reef life. And then, snap! When a potential meal passes too close, the worm launches upward using that aversible pharynx. It doesn't reach far, only a few inches above the seafloor, but that's enough. The jaws clamp shut with astonishing force, often splitting the prey in half, then they drag it into the burrow, and the whole thing happens faster than you can blink. So what's on the menu again? Mostly small fish, shrimp, mollusks, and the occasional unlucky crab. But don't let small fool you. Bobbit worms can take down prey nearly half their own length, which, for a worm that can reach 3 meters, is no small feat. Things get downright gruesome when you look at how they actually eat. After grabbing prey, they drag it down into the burrow, where it can slowly be consumed over hours, even days. There's no chewing. Instead, the bobbit worm secretes digestive enzymes, dissolving the prey from the inside out like a living crock pot. This external digestion is actually common among invertebrates, but in the bobbit worm's case, it serves another purpose, keeping them hidden. By eating below ground, it avoids attracting attention from larger predators that might spot a worm and think that's a good snack of their own. Not that many predators mess with it, but hey, discretion, right? Now, you remember how the worm burrows straight down? That's not just for hiding, it's also structural. The body of the worm is laced with thousands of bristle-like structures called chaetae, which grip the sand like Velcro. This allows it to anchor itself tightly in place during a strike. Without that traction, launching at high speed could yank the worm out of its own burrow faster than a plucked pubic hair. Now here's a fun fact. Bobbit worms can actually be left or right-handed, technically, in how they twist their jaws. Just like you have a dominant hand, some worms seem to favor a side in how they angle their bite. Not at all due to joints or bones, but just how they feel like reacting to pressure on their squishy insides. Let's also talk about hunting times, when the worms meet other creatures' squishy insides. Bobbit worms are nocturnal, so they spend daylight hours buried deep and emerge at dusk. Some aquarium keepers have tried to catch their worms in the act with infrared cameras, and the result? Footage of fish vanishing mid-swim like a mini Bermuda Triangle. And remember, the worm doesn't just go for easy prey. It can't tell the difference. It'll strike anything that triggers its sensors. That includes rocks, human fingers, underwater cameras, and in one rare case, a moray eel. The eel escaped, but barely. It left part of its tail behind. It's easy to think of the bobbit worm as a mindless ambusher, but marine biologists have observed it altering its tactics. If prey patterns shift, the worm adjusts where it places its antennae or how long it waits between strikes. There's no brain, but there's definitely feedback. Now, we often associate intelligence with planning and strategy, but in the ocean, sometimes simplicity is more effective. The bobbit worm only reacts, doesn't remember, but it reacts flawlessly. And over hundreds of millions of years, that reaction system has become a fine-tuned machine of outcome. There's a philosophical point buried here somewhere about overthinking or the elegance of simple systems, but I'll save that for when you're staring at the ceiling tonight wondering if anything's hiding under your bed or under your beach towel. You might be wondering, where does the name bobbit worm even come from? It sounds like a rejected sci-fi villain or a Monty Python character. But no, it's actually named, somewhat tastelessly, after a real-life criminal case from the 1990s involving Lorena Bobbit, who famously severed her abusive husband's genitals. And unfortunately, someone in the marine biology community thought, hey, that sounds familiar. Now, to be clear, the worm doesn't actually bite things off in that specific way, but the ferocity and surprise of its bite, combined with its sneaky nature, left a cultural impression that stuck. And while the name isn't exactly scientific, bobbit worm is what we've got. To this day, it's the name used in aquariums, science articles, and nature documentaries. Now, the bobbit worm already seems like the underwater equivalent of a horror movie monster, but it turns out just like horror monsters, you can almost never get rid of them. Most animals when wounded just retreat and gamble whether they heal or die. The bobbit worm actually regenerates at a huge scale. I don't mean a scraped fin or a swollen exoskeleton, we're talking full body sections. There's documented evidence that if a bobbit worm is sliced in two, say by a panicked aquarist with a pair of tongs, each half might continue wriggling for hours, sometimes days. In some cases, the front end simply keeps hunting like nothing happened. This kind of regenerative ability isn't unique in the worm world. Planarians, ribbon worms, and certain other polychaetes all exhibit impressive regrowth, but Eunice aphroditois takes it a step further by also being nearly indestructible on the cellular level. Its tissues can survive in low oxygen conditions, its nervous system is decentralized, and it doesn't rely on a circulatory system like we do. In other words, there's no single off switch. And now we come to reproduction. The bobbit worm's version of dating is, predictably, also a little strange. They reproduce via external fertilization, meaning males and females release sperm and eggs into the water column, often en masse, triggered by environmental cues like lunar cycles or temperature shifts. This approach is chaotic but effective. The immediate area becomes a sea of worm semen that float as plankton until they find their special egg. The larval stage is especially hard to track. Because they're transparent and microscopic, researchers have only recently begun identifying bobbit worm larvae with genetic markers. That means we're still learning how far they travel, what triggers their transformation, and how many different species we might be misidentifying as bobbit worms. Now here's where things get really science fiction. The bobbit worm is polychaetous, meaning it belongs to a class of segmented worms that often have parapodia, little bristle feet that help with locomotion. But these bristles aren't just for walking. In some polychaetes, they're laced with toxins, and there's a growing body of evidence that Eunice aphroditois may also inject a toxin into its prey, paralyzing it to prevent escape before feeding. It's still under study, but it would explain why many captured fish go limp immediately upon being bitten. And remember Barry, the worm from the UK aquarium? When they tried to pull him out, he reportedly broke into pieces and slithered into several cracks, some of which were never fully cleared, meaning parts of Barry may still be in that tank. One of the most baffling facts about bobbit worms is how little we truly understand them. Despite their striking characteristics and global presence in warm waters, they remain poorly studied. Why? Because they're hard to find, hard to raise in labs, and even harder to study without ending up with shredded fingers. In 2015, a team from the University of Western Australia tried to create controlled environments to observe their behaviors more closely. They built transparent tunnels in sediment tanks and monitored hunting activity with infrared cameras. The results were a little unnerving. The worms would strike faster than the cameras could reliably capture, sometimes in under a millisecond. The bait would vanish, and the worm would retreat before any motion sensors could really react. It's like trying to study a trap that resets itself before you notice it fired off. Also, these worms don't just eat meat. While they prefer fish and crustaceans, some have been observed scavenging or even nibbling on seaweed and detritus. This makes them opportunistic feeders, able to thrive in environments where hunting is risky or unreliable. Think of them as deep-sea equivalents of raccoons, if raccoons had guillotines for mouths and lived in quicksand. Now for the immortality myth. No, bobbit worms aren't technically immortal as much as you might hear that when you look them up. But they don't really age the way we do. Many invertebrates like themselves exhibit something called negligible senescence, which means they don't show signs of biological aging over time. Their cells don't accumulate damage at the same pace, and their regenerative abilities delay the usual signs of wear and tear. In stable, protected environments, it's plausible that a bobbit worm could live for decades, possibly longer. There's even anecdotal speculation among aquarists that some of the longest living captive specimens are pushing 30 years old, but without rigorous tracking, we can't be sure. The bobbit worm isn't just a fun trivia monster. It's a reminder that evolution isn't interested in being cool or imposing. We spend a lot of time idolizing large predators. Lions, sharks, wolves. Just look at how many weirdos have podcasts where they call themselves an alpha wolf. But the bobbit worm proves that dominance doesn't always wear fur and fangs. Sometimes it's a silent, glimmering tube hiding beneath your feet, waiting with infinite patience. And maybe that's the lesson. Don't assume power is always a loud show-off. Resilience, strategy, and quiet precision often go further than size or noise. The bobbit worm doesn't announce anything because it has nothing to prove. It just wants to win. So the next time you feel overshadowed or overlooked, remember, you don't need to be loud to be strong. You don't need to be flashy to be effective. Sometimes the most underestimated things in the world are the ones shaping it the most. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Now go forth and absorb your new knowledge. Many thanks again to viewer Tristan Corbishley for engaging and suggesting the bobbit worm video. If you have your own suggestion, we're very happy to get community feedback. See you next time. We'll catch you for your next cup of coffee.